She had been folding laundry when her phone exploded. 17 texts in 4 minutes. Then her sister calling. Then her mother. Then a number she didn't recognize. And when she finally turned on the television and saw her husband's face filling the screen, his mouth on another woman's mouth, broadcast live to 4 million people at the Nashville Music Awards, she set down the shirt she was folding, his shirt, which she had washed and pressed herself, and felt something cold and clarifying move through her like a current, and she thought, with the absolute stillness of a woman who has just been handed both a wound and a weapon at the same time. So that's how we're doing this. Welcome back, my wonderful family and friends. I am Mr. Zaha. Thanks for tuning in today. A kind words from a man who has seen it all. Marriage are not mostly bed of roses. Sometime you need more of. More of what? Can't say. Continue watching, and you will surely know what to do in situations like this. Kindly hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll be bringing you another exciting story you definitely don't want to miss. So let's get started. Nashville in October was unreasonably beautiful. Vivian Calloway had always thought this, had thought it every October for the 11 years she had lived here, watching the city do what it did in autumn, the hills going gold and copper above the Cumberland River, the air turning crisp and particular, carrying that specific Nashville smell of wood smoke and ambition and the faint, ever-present suggestion of music coming from somewhere you couldn't quite locate. She had grown up in this city. She knew its rhythms the way you know the rhythms of a person you have loved a long time. The good seasons and the difficult ones, the parts that were beautiful and the parts that required navigation. She was sitting in the living room of the house on Chickering Road when everything changed. The house was a 1940s colonial revival in Forest Hills, wide porches, original hardwood floors, a back garden that Vivian had spent 4 years turning into something extraordinary, with climbing roses on the fence and a kitchen herb section and a Japanese maple in the corner that turned the color of garnets in October. It was a beautiful house. It was, if she was honest with herself in the particular, clear-eyed way she was capable of on good days, the most complete expression of herself that currently existed in her daily life, more fully hers than her marriage had felt in some time, which was a thought she had been having with increasing frequency and decreasing ability to set aside. She was folding laundry. His laundry, mostly, the particular archaeology of a wife's domestic life, the way you come to know a person's wardrobe better than they do, the shirts and the slacks and the specific dry-clean-only blazer he always forgot about until he needed it, and then expected to simply exist, cleaned and pressed, in the closet. She had been doing this for 9 years. She had stopped noticing that she was doing it, which was itself a kind of information she had been avoiding. Her phone began. Vivian Calloway, née Hargrove, though she had taken James's name at marriage and used it professionally and publicly, keeping Hargrove in the place where things live that are too important to display, was 37 years old. She had a master's degree in arts administration from Vanderbilt. She had worked for 6 years at a nonprofit arts foundation in Nashville before transitioning, gradually and somewhat reluctantly, into the role that her marriage had seemed to require, the role of James Calloway's wife, which was not a small role in Nashville's music industry circles, and which she had performed with the competence she brought to everything, which was considerable. She was on 3 nonprofit boards. She chaired the annual fundraising gala for the Nashville Children's Arts Initiative, which under her 4 years of leadership had tripled its annual revenue. She was, in the world that knew her, regarded as capable and warm and exceptionally well-organized, the kind of woman who made difficult things look effortless, which meant that the difficulty was invisible, which meant that the effort went unacknowledged, which was a dynamic she had grown accustomed to without ever quite accepting it. Her maiden name was Hargrove, as in Hargrove Communications, as in the media and telecommunications company founded by her grandfather, William Hargrove Sr., in 1958 in Nashville, Tennessee, which had grown over 66 years into a privately held empire encompassing regional television stations, radio networks, digital media properties, and a telecommunications infrastructure division that operated across 14 states. It was not a company that made the national news regularly, because the Hargroves had always preferred operating to performing, had always understood that the most durable power is the kind that doesn't need an audience. Vivian's father, William Hargrove Jr., Bill, to everyone who knew him, a compact and extraordinarily shrewd man who had inherited his father's instincts and sharpened them further, had been transitioning the company's operational control to Vivian for 3 years, through the specific and deliberate mechanism of the Hargrove Family Trust, which had been restructured with great care and considerable legal precision to ensure that when the time came, what was Vivian's would be entirely and unambiguously Vivian's. The time, her father had been gently suggesting for 18 months, had come. Vivian had been suggesting, gently back, that she needed more time. Her father, who was patient in the way of a man who has built things that last, had been waiting. James Calloway was the president of A&R at Monument Sound Group, one of Nashville's most significant independent music labels, occupying 3 floors of a glass building on Music Row and responsible for the careers of 11 artists who currently had songs on the country charts. He was 42, tall, the kind of handsome that photographs well and translates into the social currency of an industry built partly on appearance, with the easy charm of a man who has spent 20 years being the most dynamic person in most rooms he entered. He was good at his job. Vivian had always acknowledged this, had separated it clearly from her feelings about him as a husband, in the way she separated most things, with the clean precision of a woman who had trained herself not to let the categories bleed. He was good at his job, and he had built something real at Monument Sound, and she had been genuinely proud of him for it, for years, with the uncomplicated pride of a wife who wants her husband to thrive. The problem was not his success. The problem was what his success had done to his perception of the architecture of their life, the way it had gradually, imperceptibly reconfigured his understanding of who was central and who was supporting, who was the story and who was the setting, until Vivian had become, in the internal map of her husband's life, something like the house on Chickering Road itself, essential, beautiful, assumed, and never once thought about in terms of what it cost to maintain. She had tried to talk to him about this. 3 times in the past 2 years she had found the words and the moment and the specific courage required to say, plainly, and without drama, "I am disappearing inside this marriage, James. I need you to see me." And 3 times he had heard her with the patient, distracted attention of a man hearing a concern he has decided in advance is manageable, and he had said the right things. "I hear you, Viv. I know I've been buried at work. Things will slow down after the quarter. I love you." And nothing had changed, because the saying of the right things had relieved the pressure without addressing the source, and they had continued, and she had continued, and the distance had continued to accumulate with the quiet, patient persistence of water finding the lowest point. She had not known about Stephanie Pruitt. Or rather, she had known the name, had known the position, had met her once at a Monument Sound function and registered her the way you register things that feel faintly significant without being able to say why, and had filed the feeling in the place where she kept things she didn't have enough information to act on. She had enough information now. The text from her sister, Dana, came first. "Viv, turn on channel 4. Now." Then her college roommate, Priya. "Oh my God. Vivian. I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" Then her mother. "Vivian baby, please call me." Then 5 numbers she didn't recognize, which meant it had already cleared the boundary of people who knew her personally, and was moving into the territory of people who simply knew who she was. She picked up the remote. She turned on channel 4. The Nashville Music Awards were broadcasting live from Bridgestone Arena. The camera, one of the roving crowd cameras, the kind deployed to capture the atmosphere and the celebrity sightings and the spontaneous moments that made live television what it was, had found, in the crowd of 4,000 people in the lower bowl of the arena, 2 people who did not know they were being filmed. James Calloway, president of A&R at Monument Sound Group, and Stephanie Pruitt, head of human resources at Monument Sound Group, not talking, not standing adjacently in the way of colleagues at an industry event, his hand on her face, her hand on his chest, their mouths together with the unmistakable ease of people who have been doing this long enough that it no longer requires thought. The camera held on them for 4 seconds, 4 seconds of live broadcast, of 4 million viewers, of Vivian's phone detonating in her hand, before a producer somewhere realized what was on the screen and cut away. For seconds, Vivian stood in her living room on Chickering Road with the remote in one hand and James's freshly folded shirt in the other, and she watched the broadcast cut to a commercial, and she stood very still. She set the shirt down on the couch. She set the remote down beside it. She picked up her phone and she called her father. He answered on the first ring, which meant he had already seen it, which meant it was already exactly as large as her phone suggested it was. "Daddy," she said. "I'm here, sweetheart," Bill Hargrove said. And Vivian Calloway, who had been folding her husband's laundry when her life changed, sat down on the couch next to his neatly pressed shirt and said, with the quiet, iron clarity of a woman who has just decided something she will not be undeciding, "I need to talk to you about the trust." She set the shirt down. She picked up the phone. She called her father. If that sequence just told you everything about who this woman is, drop a comment. We're just getting started. He came home at 12:47 in the morning. Vivian knew the time because she had not slept, had not tried to sleep, had not performed the pretense of a woman waiting in bed for a conversation she had already decided the shape of. She was in the kitchen when she heard his key in the door. Sitting at the island with a cup of tea that had gone cold 2 hours ago, her phone face down beside it, the kitchen lit by the single pendant light above the island that cast everything in a warm, specific amber that she had always loved about this kitchen, and which tonight felt like an irony she didn't have the energy to appreciate. She had spent the 4 hours since her phone exploded doing several things. She had called her father and talked for 40 minutes. Not crying, not performing anguish, talking, the way the Hargrove family talked when something required action, with the direct, unsentimental clarity of people who understand that emotion and strategy are not mutually exclusive, but must be sequenced correctly. Her father had listened and spoken, and at the end of the call had said, simply, "The trust is ready when you are. You say the word." She had said, "Not yet, but soon." She had called her attorney, not a family attorney, her own, a Nashville woman named Claire Sutton, who had been Vivian's personal counsel for 6 years, and who answered at 10:15 at night with the alert, immediately focused attention of someone who had seen the broadcast and had been waiting for exactly this call. She had called no one else. She had not called James. This was, she understood, the thing he would walk in expecting. The tearful wife, the confrontation shaped by her devastation, the conversation that took place entirely on the terrain of her pain, which was also the terrain where he was most comfortable because it was the terrain where he held the most interpretive power. She had given him that terrain before. She had sat across from him in moments of conflict and led with her hurt and watched him navigate it with the particular, polished skill of a man who has learned that the best response to a wife's pain is a careful performance of remorse calibrated precisely to end the conversation without changing the behavior. She was not doing that tonight. She heard his footsteps in the entryway. She heard him stop. He had seen the kitchen light. He appeared in the doorway looking exactly like what he was. A man who had spent 4 hours constructing an explanation and was now delivering it into a room that was not arranged the way he had expected. He was still in the clothes she had seen on the television broadcast, which struck her as either oblivious or arrogant, and she hadn't decided which. His expression was the one she had categorized, over 9 years, as his difficult conversation face, remorseful surface, operational interior, the look of a man who is feeling his way toward the version of events that costs him least. "Viv," he said. "Sit down, James," she said. Something in her voice, the specific temperature of it, the absence of the tremor he had probably been bracing for, made him pause in the doorway for a moment before he came in and sat at the island across from her. He looked at her. She looked at him. She waited, not from uncertainty, but from the deliberate choice of a woman who has learned the specific power of letting silence do the work that words don't need to. "I know what you saw," he said. "I know you know," she said. "I need you to let me explain." "I'm listening." He looked slightly wrong-footed by this, by her stillness, by the absence of tears or raised voices, by the cold cup of tea and the woman sitting across from him who looked. He was perhaps beginning to register, less like a devastated wife, and more like someone who has already moved several steps past the devastation into territory he hadn't mapped. "Stephanie and I," he stopped. He reorganized. "What you saw it was a mistake. It was one moment. It was, I had too much to drink at the pre-show and things got." "James." He stopped. "I need you to make a decision right now," she said, "about what kind of conversation this is going to be. You can tell me the truth, or you can tell me a managed version of the truth. But I need you to know before you choose that I am not sitting in this kitchen at 1 in the morning because I want to be managed. I have been managed for 3 years and I am done with it." She held his eyes across the island, across 9 years of marriage and the cold cup of tea and the folded shirt still on the living room couch. "So, The truth, please. A long silence. James Calloway looked at his wife, really looked, with the specific quality of attention that registers something unexpected, and in that look she saw the moment his prepared explanation met the reality of who was sitting across from him, and found the reality considerably more formidable than he had prepared for. He put his hands flat on the island. "It's been 6 months," he said. The kitchen was very quiet. "6 months," she said. It wasn't supposed to be what it became. It started as, "I don't need the origin story, James." Her voice was level, not cold. She was not a cold woman, had never been, and was not going to perform coldness tonight because she was not performing anything tonight. "I need to know if it's over." He looked at the island. The answer was in the looking. "I see," she said. "Viv, I want you to stay somewhere else tonight," she said. "Not forever. Just tonight. I need." She paused, and in the pause allowed herself one moment of complete honesty, one unguarded beat that was for her rather than for the conversation. "I need tonight. Vivian, we need to talk about this." "We will," she said. "We absolutely will. But not tonight, James. Tonight, I need you to go." He looked at her for a long moment. Looked at the woman he had married 9 years ago, who had built his home and raised his social profile and chaired galas and folded his laundry and tried, 3 times in 2 years, to tell him she was disappearing, and who was sitting across from him now with the composed, undeflectable expression of a woman who has located something in herself that his behavior has catalyzed rather than destroyed. He got up. He got his keys. At the door he stopped. "Viv, I'm sorry." She looked at him across the kitchen. "I know you are," she said. He left. She sat in the kitchen for a long time after. She allowed herself, in the specific privacy of the empty house, to feel the full weight of it. The 6 months, the live television, the 4 million people, the woman whose hand had been on her husband's chest in the lower bowl of Bridgestone Arena, while Vivian was home folding his shirts. She allowed it to land, completely, and without management, the way she had not permitted herself to do while he was in the room. She felt it move through her, the hurt of it, raw and real, the specific grief of a woman who has suspected something and been given undeniable confirmation, the humiliation of the public nature of it, the precise and personal insult of the 4 seconds on live television. She felt all of it. She did not drown in it. This was the thing about Vivian Calloway, née Hargrove, daughter of Bill, granddaughter of William Sr., a woman built from the specific material of people who had survived and built and refused to be defined by what had been done to them. She could feel the full force of a thing without being dismantled by it. She had always been able to do this. It was not hardness. It was depth, the same depth that allowed her to love completely, to commit entirely, to give herself to things without reservation. She felt things all the way down, and all the way down was where she also found her foundation. She was standing on it now. At 2:15 in the morning, she opened her laptop. She opened the folder she had created 6 months ago, labeled, with the dry precision of a woman who knows herself, Hargrove, when ready, and she read through the documents her father's attorneys had sent. The trust summary, the board structure, the operational transition plan, the asset overview that she had read once, in her father's attorney's office in Nashville, and had not allowed herself to read again because reading it again meant accepting it, and accepting it meant becoming, fully, and without the protection of deferral, the woman it described. She read it now. All of it. She read it with the focused, unhurried attention of a woman doing serious work, which was what it was, what she had always been underneath the domestic architecture of a life that had been built more around someone else's needs than her own. She read until 4 in the morning. Then she opened a new email and addressed it to her father's lead attorney, a meticulous Memphis man named Howard Gaines who had been waiting, with professional patience, for this exact email. She typed, "Howard, I'm ready to proceed. All of it. Let's schedule for Monday." She paused. She looked at the send button. She thought about James's face in the kitchen doorway. She thought about 6 months. She thought about 4 seconds on live television and 4 million people, and the specific quality of humiliation that comes from being betrayed publicly, from having the private catastrophe of your marriage become content. She thought about something else too. She thought about 9 years. About the man she had married and the genuine things that had existed between them before the distance accumulated. About 3 conversations where she had tried to say, "I am disappearing," and he had heard and not changed. About whether disappearing was something that had been done to her, or something she had permitted. About whether the answer to both things being true simultaneously was destruction or transformation. She pressed send. Then she opened a second email, this one to Claire Sutton, her attorney, and typed, Claire, Monday morning. I want to go through all options. Not just the nuclear one. All of them. She pressed send on that one too. Then she closed the laptop. She washed the cold tea down the sink. She turned off the pendant light. She climbed the stairs to the bedroom. Their bedroom. The one she had not redecorated in James's taste. The one room in the house that was entirely hers. That she had filled with the things she loved without negotiation. And she lay down on her side of the bed, and she looked at the ceiling. She did not sleep for a long time. But she was not, she realized, lying in the dark being consumed by what had happened. She was lying in the dark making plans. Which was, she understood, the most Hargrove thing she had done in 9 years. The unthinkable thing happened on Monday. Not the nuclear option. Vivian was not a nuclear option woman. Had never been. Understood instinctively that the most powerful moves are rarely the loudest ones. Not the public retaliation that 4 million viewers might have expected from a woman whose humiliation had been broadcast live. Not the dramatic confrontation that Nashville's music industry gossip infrastructure was almost certainly anticipating. Something quieter. Something permanent. Something that James Calloway, who had spent 9 years building a career in an industry that ran on relationships and access and the specific, invisible infrastructure of who owned what and who answered to whom, would not see coming until it had already arrived. Vivian Hargrove Calloway walked into Howard Gaines's office on Monday morning and assumed full operational control of the Hargrove Family Trust. And then she made a phone call that would take 3 days to become visible and would change everything when it did. She called the chairman of the board of Monument Sound Group. His name was Gerald Hargrove. Her uncle. She called the chairman of Monument Sound Group. His name was Gerald Hargrove. Her uncle. Did you just feel the force shift? Drop a comment right now. Tell me you felt that. Nashville was a small town wearing a big city's clothes. This was the thing that outsiders never fully understood about it. That beneath the Broadway neon and the glass towers on Music Row and the industry machinery that moved billions of dollars of music through the world every year, Nashville operated with the specific, intimate dynamics of a place where everybody knew everybody, where 6 degrees of separation was a generous estimate, where the wrong conversation at the wrong table at Adele's restaurant could move through the industry by morning, with the efficiency of something that had been deliberately broadcast. Vivian had always understood this. James had always known it too, had known it and used it, had understood that in this city, relationships were infrastructure, that who you knew and who knew you and what they thought of you when your name came up in a room you weren't in was the actual foundation beneath every deal and every career and every carefully constructed professional identity. He had simply never considered that this infrastructure could be used against him. He had never considered it because he had never considered Vivian. That was the thing. That was the specific, costly thing that sat at the center of everything that was now quietly, methodically beginning to move. The call to Gerald Hargrove had lasted 22 minutes. Gerald was 68, her father's older brother, a man who had the Hargrove family's characteristic combination of exceptional intelligence and absolute economy of expression. He did not waste words the way he did not waste anything, had not survived 68 years, and built the things he'd built by spending more than was necessary on any transaction. He had been on Monument Sound Group's board for 11 years, since the label's founder had approached the Hargrove family about a strategic investment that had seemed, at the time, like a straightforward minority stake. Vivian knew better than anyone that nothing the Hargrove family touched was purely a minority anything. She had not told Gerald what to do. She had not needed to. She had told him what she knew, about the 6 months, about the live broadcast, about the specific professional impropriety of a company president conducting a relationship with his own head of human resources, which was not merely a personal failing but a liability that any board with its institutional responsibilities intact would be required to address. She had told him these things in the measured, precise way she had learned from watching the Hargrove men and women navigate difficult information for 37 years, and when she finished, Gerald had been quiet for a moment. Then he had said, "I'll look into it." 3 words. In Gerald Hargrove's vocabulary, 3 words of that particular arrangement were the equivalent of a full strategic deployment. By Wednesday, The whispers had started. Vivian heard them the way she heard most things in Nashville. Obliquely, through the network of relationships she had built over 11 years that James had always filed under Viv's social stuff and had never understood was, in its quiet way, one of the most comprehensive information systems in the city. Her board colleagues, her gala committee, the women she had lunch with, and the men who called her father, and the specific, fertile information environment of a city that conducted most of its real business in conversations that looked like socializing. She was having coffee with her friend Margot Davies, Arts Foundation Board, 12-year Nashville transplant, the kind of woman who knew everything and told only what was useful. At a cafe on Hillsborough Village on Wednesday afternoon, when Margot set down her cup and looked at her with the careful expression of a woman delivering something that requires delicacy. "There's talk," Margot said. "About Monument Sound. Board activity." She paused. Unusual board activity. Howard Gaines was seen at the Monument Sound building Tuesday morning. Vivian lifted her coffee cup. "Howard Gaines has a lot of clients," she said. Margot looked at her for a moment with the specific, assessing attention of a woman who has known Vivian long enough to read the thing beneath the thing. "Of course he does," Margot said. They moved on to other subjects. James called on Wednesday evening. He had been calling since Monday. Not frantically, not with the desperate frequency of a man unraveling, but with the steady, persistent rhythm of a man who has constructed an approach and is executing it. He had left 2 voicemails that were carefully worded, that said the right things in the right register. "I love you. Viv, I need us to talk. I know I have to earn this back. Please call me." And which she had listened to with the detached attention of a woman evaluating the quality of a performance she had seen before and was no longer auditioning for. She answered on Wednesday, not because the voicemails had moved her, though the part of her that still held 9 years of genuine history, that had not yet decided what she was going to do with that history, registered them fully. She answered because she had decided, in the clear-eyed calculus of these 3 days, that the worst thing she could do was go silent. Silence would make him panic, and a panicked James would be unpredictable, and unpredictable was not what she needed right now. She needed him exactly where she could see him. "Viv," he said, and the relief in his voice was real, which was the complicated thing about James Calloway that she had never been able to resolve cleanly. The genuine things in him that coexisted with the careless things, the authentic feeling that lived alongside the behavior that contradicted it. "James," she said, Thank you for picking up. I've been wanting to." "How are things at work?" she said. A brief pause. "What? Work?" she said. "Monument Sound. How are things?" Another pause, longer. "Fine." "What?" "Just asking," she said. "I know it's been a busy week." The pause that followed had a different quality, the quality of a man registering something he can't identify, a subtle wrongness in the terrain, the faint sensation of a floor that should be solid announcing, very quietly, that it might not be. "It's been fine," he said carefully. "Viv, I want to talk about us." "About what happened?" "About Stephanie. I ended it. Monday morning, I ended it completely in." "I'm glad to hear that," she said. "I need you to know that I am serious about fixing this. About fixing us. I know what I did and I know what it cost, and I am." "James." She kept her voice warm. Not forgiving. Not yet. Not performing a forgiveness she hadn't decided on. But warm. Because warmth was not weakness, because warmth was what you offered someone you were still deciding about. "I hear you. I need a little more time. Can you give me that?" "Of course," he said, immediately, with the gratitude of a man who has been expecting worse. "Of course, Viv. Whatever you need." "Thank you," she said. Can I come home soon?" She looked around the kitchen, the pendant light, the island, the place where she had sat with the cold tea 3 nights ago, and watched her marriage detonate on live television. "Soon," she said. "Not yet." They said goodnight. She set the phone down. She sat for a moment in the quiet of the kitchen. Then she opened her laptop and sent a brief email to Claire Sutton. He ended it with Stephanie Monday. Confirmed. Continue as planned. What Vivian had done, the unthinkable thing, the quiet thing, the thing that was not nuclear but was in its own way more comprehensive than nuclear, was not a single action. It was a sequence. She had learned this from her grandfather William Sr., who had built Hargrove Communications from nothing in 1958 by understanding that the most durable outcomes are built from sequences of correct decisions rather than single dramatic gestures. He had said this to her once, when she was 14, sitting in his study in the house in Belmead, and she had written it in the journal she kept at the time and had carried it in the wordless, cellular way that the right information carries when you receive it at the right age. Sequences, Vivian. Not gestures. Gestures make noise. Sequences make change. The sequence had begun with the call to Howard Gaines. It had continued with the call to Gerald. It had proceeded, on Tuesday afternoon, with a meeting in Claire Sutton's office where Vivian had laid out not the nuclear option but the architectural option, not destruction, but restructuring. Not the taking of everything, but the deliberate, careful repositioning of herself within the landscape of her own life, so that when the dust settled, she would be standing on ground that was entirely and unambiguously hers. The sequence had one more significant move. It happened on Thursday. The Monument Soundboard met on Thursday afternoon. Vivian was not there. She had no formal seat at that table, had never needed one, had always understood that the most powerful position in any room is the one that shapes what happens in it without being visible. Gerald was there. 3 other board members who had received, through channels that traced back to Howard Gaines's Tuesday visit, documentation of the specific HR liability that James Calloway's 6-month relationship with Stephanie Pruitt represented were there. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. Vivian was at her kitchen island when Gerald called. "It's done," he said. "What exactly is done?" she said, because precision mattered. "He's been placed on administrative leave pending a formal HR review," Gerald said. "Given the circumstances, the nature of the relationship, the public exposure, the liability questions, the board has determined that a review is necessary before his contract status can be confirmed." A pause. "It will be a thorough review." Vivian was quiet. "Vivian," Gerald said, in the tone of a man who wants to ask something and is deciding whether to. "What do you want the outcome to be?" It was the question she had been sitting with since Monday. Since the cold tea and the pendant light and the folded shirt on the couch. Since 3 conversations where she had said, "I am disappearing," and nothing had changed. Since 4 seconds of live television and 4 million people and the specific, clarifying cold that had moved through her like a current. She thought about 9 years. She thought about the genuine things, the early years, the man who had looked at her across a room at a Vanderbilt alumni event and said something genuinely funny, and then actually listened, to her response. The years when the window was open. The years before the distance had accumulated into something structural. She thought about what her father had said on the phone Monday night, after the strategy was done and the calls were made, and it was just the 2 of them. "Whatever you decide, sweetheart, make sure you decide it from your whole self. Not just the hurt. Not just the anger. Your whole self." She sat at the kitchen island with the phone to her ear. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "I need to talk to him first. The real conversation, not the managed one. The real one." "Understood," Gerald said. "But Gerald." "Yes. Don't let them make it easy for him," she said. "Whatever happens between us, he needs to understand what it costs. The real cost. Not just with me. With everything." A pause. "He needs to understand what he almost threw away." Gerald Hargrove, 68 years old, who had watched his niece for 37 years with the quiet, comprehensive attention of a man who recognizes quality and has been waiting patiently for it to recognize itself, said, "I think he's beginning to." James called at 8 that night. He did not sound like the man who had called on Wednesday with his carefully constructed approach. He sounded like a man standing in a room that has just stopped being the room he thought it was. His voice stripped of the management, of the careful calibration, carrying instead the raw and disoriented quality of someone whose footing has gone. "Viv," he said, "I need to tell you something." "Tell me," she said. "The board," he stopped. "There's a review. An HR review. Gerald called me personally and Viv, I don't." He stopped again. "Is this connected to you?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, with the precise, clear honesty she had decided was the only language she was going to speak from here forward. "James, do you know who my father is?" A silence. "Bill Hargrove," he said slowly. "Of course I." "Do you know what Hargrove Communications is?" she said. "Not the name. Not the general idea. Do you actually know what it is, what it holds, what it controls? Have you ever actually looked?" The silence on the line was the longest yet, and in that silence she heard, finally, the sound of a man beginning to understand the size of what he had never thought to ask. Speech balloon, "Do you actually know what it is?" 9 years, and he never looked. Drop a comment. Tell me how that landed. He came to the house on Friday evening. Not because she had invited him. She hadn't. Not formally. Not with the specific permission of a wife ready to receive her husband back into the home he had vacated 4 days ago. He came because he had spent 4 days in a hotel room on West End Avenue, doing something he had not done in a very long time, possibly ever, with the thoroughness that the situation required. He had looked. He had sat with his laptop in a hotel room, and he had searched Hargrove Communications with the focused, comprehensive attention of a man who is no longer looking to confirm what he already thinks he knows, but is genuinely, for the first time, trying to understand what he doesn't. He had read the company history, founded 1958, William Hargrove Sr., Nashville, Tennessee. He had read the portfolio breakdown, the television stations, the radio networks, the digital properties, the telecommunications infrastructure division operating across 14 states. He had found the 2019 profile in a regional business publication that had called Hargrove Communications the most significant privately held media company in the Southeast that most people have never heard of, which was not an accident. The article had noted, but a deliberate and multi-generational strategic choice. He had read the section about succession. He had found Vivian's name. He had sat in the hotel room for a long time after that. Then he had driven to Chickering Road. She heard the car in the driveway at 6:45. She was in the kitchen that had become, in the past 4 days, the room where everything happened, the room that had witnessed the cold tea and the pendant light and the decision and all the quiet, consequential moves that had followed it. She was making dinner, not because she had planned for company, but because cooking was the thing she did when she needed to think, had always been. The physical engagement of it creating the specific mental space where her clearest thoughts arrived. She heard the car. She did not go to the door. She heard him knock, which he had never done before, had always used his key, but he had left his key on the entryway table the night she asked him to leave and had apparently not brought it, or had decided that bringing it tonight would be a presumption he hadn't earned. The knock was careful, not tentative. James Calloway had not been tentative a day in his life, but considered. The knock of a man who is paying attention to what he does. She went to the door. She opened it. He was standing on the porch in the October evening. No suit jacket, open collar. The specific undone quality of a man who has spent 4 days in a hotel room doing something difficult and looks like it. He was holding nothing. No flowers, no rehearsed gesture, no prop. He was just standing there, in the amber porch light, looking at her with the expression she had last seen in its early, genuine form 8 years ago, before the distance, before the accumulation, the expression of a man who is completely present and knows it, and is slightly undone by the fact. "Can I come in?" he said. She stepped back from the door. They sat at the kitchen island. She put a glass of water in front of him because it was something to do with her hands, and because the ordinary act of it steadied something in the room, gave them a surface beneath the conversation. She stood on her side of the island. He sat on his. The pendant light was on. The kitchen smelled like the pasta she'd been making. For a moment neither of them said anything. Then James Calloway put both hands flat on the marble island, the island she had selected, from a reclaimed stone supplier in East Nashville, on a Tuesday afternoon 3 years ago while he was in a meeting, and he looked at his wife across it, and said, "I didn't know." "I know you didn't," she said. "I don't mean that as an excuse," he said quickly. "I mean it as an indictment of myself. I didn't know because I didn't look. Because I never." He stopped. He pressed his hands harder against the marble, as though the solidity of it was useful to him. "I built my whole understanding of our life around what I could see, and I never once asked what I might be missing. I never asked who you were outside of us, outside of me." He looked up at her. "I treated you like a constant, like something that was simply there, reliably, beautifully there, and I never." He stopped again. Vivian looked at him. She thought about 3 conversations. "I am disappearing, James." She thought about what it had cost to say that, and be heard, and not be changed for. She thought about the hotel room he was presumably still paying for, and the board meeting and Gerald's phone call, and all the quiet, architectural moves of the past 4 days, and she thought about what her father had said. "From your whole self. Not just the hurt. Not just the anger. What did you find?" she said. "When you looked." He exhaled. "Hargrove Communications. The full picture." He paused. "The trust. The transition. What your father has been. What he's been building toward. He held her gaze. Vivian, you could. The scope of what you're. He stopped himself. Something moved across his face, a decision being made in real time. I'm not going to talk about it like it's a financial revelation. That's not. He shook his head. That's not what I'm sitting here about. She tilted her head slightly. Then what are you sitting here about? She said. I'm sitting here, he said, because I spent 4 days in a hotel room reading about a woman I've been married to for 9 years and feeling like I was reading about a stranger. Not because you hid yourself. Because I never looked. His voice was rough. Your grandfather built something from nothing in 1958. Your father grew it for 40 years. Your uncle sits on boards that move this city. And you, Vivian, you have been running the Children's Arts Initiative and chairing galas and folding my laundry, and I have been. He stopped. His jaw tightened. I have been having an affair with my HR director and accepting compliments on a dining table I didn't find and going to Tokyo when my wife needed me home, and I have been so catastrophically wrong about what I had. The kitchen was very quiet. The pasta water was simmering on the stove. Outside the window, the October garden was dark and still, the Japanese maple a shadow against the fence. James, Vivian said. He looked at her. I need to ask you something, she said. And I need you to answer it the way you've been talking to me tonight. Not the managed version. The real one. Okay, he said. Why Stephanie? The question landed between them and sat there. Not cruel, not designed to wound, but necessary. The specific question that all the strategy and all the architecture and all the quiet, powerful moves of the past 4 days had been circling without landing on, because it was the question underneath the question, the one that mattered more than the board review and the trust and the Hargrove family portfolio. James was quiet for a long moment. Because she was uncomplicated, he said finally. And then, with the specific courage of a man who has decided that honesty is the only available currency. Because I had made you into something so solid, so capable, so above needing anything from me. In my head, I had built you into someone who didn't need me to show up. Who didn't need me to try. And she needed me to show up. She made it visible. She made it simple. He paused. And I know how that sounds. I know what that says about me. It says, Vivian said carefully, that you were more comfortable being needed by someone you had more power than. He flinched. Yes, he said quietly. I think that's right. She looked at him across the island. This was the moment. The real one, the one beneath all the others. Not the live television, not the board review, not the Hargrove Trust or the Nashville Whispers or the unthinkable quiet thing she had done. This small, honest, devastating sentence. More comfortable being needed by someone you had more power than. And the man across the island who had heard it and not defended against it and was sitting with it with the full weight of what it cost. She had not expected this. She had prepared for the managed version. Had prepared her responses to the calibrated remorse and the careful construction. She had not prepared for this. For a man stripped of his construction, sitting in her kitchen at her island in the light she had chosen, being honest about the small and self-interested mechanics of his own failure. It did not fix it. She was clear-eyed enough to know that one honest conversation, however real, did not fix 9 years of accumulated distance and 6 months of betrayal and 4 seconds on live television. She knew this the way she knew the difference between a foundation and a facade. But it was something. It was the first honest thing they had built together in a very long time. I need you to understand something, she said. She came around the island, not to close the distance entirely, not to offer the comfort of proximity that hadn't been earned, but to be on the same side of something, to remove the marble between them because the marble had been between them long enough. She stood beside the island and she looked at him, and she said what she had been saying for 3 years in the version that never quite reached him, in the version that finally, tonight, had the full weight of everything she was behind it. I am not a constant, James. I am not a setting. I am not the house or the gala or the woman who makes your coffee and finds your dining tables and folds your shirts. She held his eyes. I am Vivian Hargrove. I have always been Vivian Hargrove. And I am about to step into the biggest chapter of my professional life. And I am going to do it with or without you. And it is going to be extraordinary either way. She paused. But I would like, if it is possible, and I do not yet know if it is possible, to not do it alone. James looked at her. He looked at her the way he had looked at her across a room at a Vanderbilt alumni event 14 years ago, before the career and the distance and the accumulation, before he had made her into a constant and stopped seeing her, with the full, undivided, slightly undone attention of a man encountering someone who is more than he was prepared for. "Tell me how," he said. "Tell me what it looks like. Tell me what you need from me, and I will. Vivian, I will do the work." Not the gesture, the work. She looked at him for a long moment. Outside, the October garden was dark. Inside, the pasta water simmered. The pendant light held them both in its amber. "It starts," she said, "with you understanding that you don't get to manage me. Not my feelings, not my decisions, not my identity. You stand next to me. Not in front. Not behind. Next to." "Yes," he said. "And James." "Yes. You are going to need to call Gerald," she said. "Not to fix the board situation. That proceeds as it proceeds. But because you owe him an honest conversation about your professional conduct, and you owe Monument sound the same, and you are going to have those conversations with the same honesty you've shown me tonight." She held his gaze. "No management. No strategy. The truth." He nodded. "And Stephanie?" "It's done," he said immediately. "Monday morning. Completely." "I know," she said. Claire confirmed it. He looked at her. "Claire Sutton," she said. "My attorney. She's very thorough." Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile. Not quite. The expression of a man arriving, slowly and with appropriate humility, at the full understanding of who he had been underestimating. "You were 3 steps ahead of me the whole time," he said. "I was," she said. "I usually am. You just weren't paying attention." The kitchen was quiet. Then James Calloway did something she had not seen him do in 9 years of marriage. He laughed. Not the social laugh, not the professional laugh, but the real one, the one that came from somewhere genuine and unguarded. The laugh of a man who has been thoroughly and deservedly outmaneuvered and has enough self-awareness to find it exactly as funny as it is. And Vivian, who had not laughed since before the broadcast, who had held herself together across 4 days of cold tea and quiet strategy and honest conversations with her father, felt something shift in her chest, something that was not forgiveness yet, but was adjacent to it, was in the same city, was on the same street. She did not laugh, but she almost did, and he saw it, and they both knew what it meant. "You were 3 steps ahead of me the whole time." Which moment in this scene broke you open? Drop it in the comments. I need to know. Nashville in November was a different kind of beautiful. Vivian had always known this too. The way the city settled after October's showiness, the hills gone from gold to bare, the Cumberland running darker and faster with the season's first cold rains, the air stripped of its amber and replaced with something cleaner and more honest. Nashville in November didn't perform. It simply was. She had always preferred it, if she was honest, to the more celebrated season. There was something to be said for beauty that didn't require an audience. She was standing at the window of the corner office on the 14th floor of the Hargrove Communications building on Church Street when her father knocked on the open door. The office had been his for 31 years. It was hers now. The transition had taken 3 weeks. Not because the legal architecture required it. Howard Gaines had the paperwork in order with the meticulous precision of a man who had been ready for this moment longer than she had, but because Vivian had insisted on doing it properly, which in Hargrove family language meant doing it in a way that would last. She had spent those 3 weeks in the building, learning its rhythms the way she had learned Nashville's rhythms, attending every relevant meeting, reading every file her father placed in front of her with the unhurried, comprehensive attention she brought to serious work. She had asked questions that surprised the senior leadership team, not because they were aggressive, but because they were precise. The questions of someone who had been thinking about a problem from the outside for years and arrived at the inside already holding the map. Her father had watched all of this from the chair across from what was now her desk, and he had said very little, because very little needed to be said. On her 3rd day in the building, Margaret Chun, head of digital operations, 22-year Hargrove employee, the kind of woman who had been waiting a long time to be led by someone worth following, had stopped her in the hallway and said, simply, "It's good to have you here, Miss Hargrove." Not Miss Calloway. Vivian had stood in the hallway for a moment after Margaret walked on. Then she had gone back to her office and called her father and told him, and Bill Hargrove had been quiet in the way he was quiet when something had moved him, and then he had said, "Your grandfather would have loved this day." She had not cried. She had come close. James had called Gerald the Monday after the kitchen conversation. She had not been on the call, had not asked to be, had not needed to be. What happened in that conversation was between two men, and it was James's to navigate with the honesty she had asked for, and she had trusted him to do it, which was itself a decision, a small and deliberate act of choosing to extend the rope of trust an inch at a time rather than all at once or not at all. Gerald had called her afterward. He was honest. Her uncle had said. "I know," she said. It was uncomfortable. "Good," she said. "The review will conclude next month. The board will make a determination about his contract." "That's the board's decision," she said. "Not mine." A pause. "Vivian, you could influence." "I know I could," she said. "I'm choosing not to. He stands on what he built, Gerald. What he keeps and what he loses professionally, that's his. I'm not going to save him from consequences, and I'm not going to add to them. That's not my job." Gerald had been quiet for a moment. Then, "Your grandfather would say that's the hardest kind of power to exercise." "I know," she said. "He said it to me once. I've been thinking about it all week." The board concluded its review in the third week of November. James Calloway was not terminated from Monument Sound Group. He was given a formal written censure, a restructured contract with a 12-month performance review clause, and a mandatory leadership coaching requirement that had been written with the specific intention of being taken seriously rather than endured. He was no longer Stephanie Pruitt's direct reporting chain. A new HR structure had been created, which everyone understood was overdue regardless of the circumstances that had precipitated it. Stephanie Pruitt had resigned the week prior, quietly, with a negotiated departure package and a non-disclosure agreement that had been handled through channels with professional discretion. James had told Vivian all of this himself, sitting across from her at a restaurant on 12th South on a Tuesday evening. Their first public dinner since the broadcast, chosen deliberately for its normalcy, for the specific signal that a woman who dines calmly with her husband in a neighborhood restaurant 3 weeks after live television is not a woman who has been destroyed. He had told her without strategy, without the managed version. She had listened. She had told him about her first week at Hargrove Communications. Not all of it, not yet, but the outline, the shape of it, what it felt like to walk into a building and understand, in the particular cellular way you understand things that are true, that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. He had listened the way she had been asking him to listen for 3 years. It was not a healed marriage. She was clear-eyed enough to know that. A healed marriage was not built in a month, was not built in the aftermath of 6 months of betrayal and 9 years of accumulated distance, not assembled from one honest conversation and a board review and a dinner on 12th South, however real and however necessary those things were. A healed marriage was a project. It required the work she had asked for, not the gesture. The work, sustained over time, visible in the daily and the mundane and the ordinary moments that were not dramatic enough to notice but were, she had come to understand, the actual material of a life together. She did not know yet whether James Calloway was capable of that work. She thought he might be. She had decided to find out. Her father sat down in the chair across from her desk, the chair that had been the visitor's chair for 31 years and was still the visitor's chair, unchanged, which she had decided to leave because some things should stay what they are. And he looked at her the way he had been looking at her for 37 years, with the quiet, comprehensive love of a man who has always known what his daughter was and has been patient about the world catching up. "How does it feel?" he said. She looked around the office. The corner windows and the Nashville skyline and the Cumberland just visible if you knew where to look. The desk that was her grandfather's and then her father's and was now hers, with the Hargrove Communications letterhead in the top right drawer and the board schedule on the screen and the particular weight of something real. "Like the right size," she said. Her father nodded. "What about James?" She considered the question the way she considered serious questions, fully, without rushing toward an answer before it was ready. "We're working," she said. Slowly. Honestly. She paused. "I think he's beginning to understand that the woman he married and the woman he underestimated were the same person the entire time." She looked at her father. "That takes some adjustment." Bill Hargrove smiled, the small, precise smile that in Hargrove family vocabulary was the equivalent of a standing ovation. "Your grandmother said something to me once," he said. "Year 3 of our marriage. I had done something, not as dramatic as your situation, but something. I had made her small in a way I hadn't seen." He folded his hands. She said, "I don't need you to be sorry, Bill. I need you to be different." He looked at his daughter. 41 years later, I was still working on it. That's not a failure. That's a marriage. Vivian looked at her father. She thought about the kitchen island and the pendant light and the 4 seconds on live television that had handed her both a wound and a weapon, and she had chosen, with the whole self her father had asked her to choose from, to use the weapon to build something rather than burn something. She thought about James's laugh in the kitchen, the real one. She thought about Margaret Chin in the hallway, Miss Hargrove. She thought about her grandfather, building something from nothing in 1958 in this city, in this particular October Nashville that she had always loved, and leaving it to people who knew what it was worth. She looked out the window at the November city. I know, she said. I'm ready to work. Downstairs, Nashville moved through its Tuesday with the specific, unhurried confidence of a city that has always understood that the most significant things happening inside it are not the ones on Broadway, not the ones on the television screens, not the 4 seconds that get broadcast to 4 million people and then become, like all broadcasts, yesterday's news. The most significant things are quieter. A woman at a desk that is finally hers. A city carrying her name. And somewhere in the distance, always, the suggestion of music from a place you can't quite locate. Thank you so much for watching my story all the way to the end. Your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.